How are you?
Hey Maria, how are we doing today?
Doing pretty good. I'm excited for this episode. I think it's going to be a good one. I know our last one went really well, just very natural flow to it. And
Yeah.
so, just for people who don't know what we're doing here, I'm Maria Clemente Morresi. This is Vanina Clemente, and we are collaborating. Both of our practices, both of our companies are collaborating on several podcast episodes related to motherhood, pregnancy, and the mental health intersection between all of those things, which gives us an abundance of things to talk about. Last time,
Essentially a mini series is what we're doing.
yes, a mini series. So it's between PTSV, Vanina's podcast, and my practices podcast, which is called Life Psych, which this is the baby bump edition of Life Psych, kind of following my journey over the past few years of pregnancy and postpartum and motherhood and all of that. Yeah, so last time the episode that we recorded was about trauma in terms of like how does that affect pregnancy? How does that affect the immediacy of postpartum when it comes to things like breastfeeding and then just the entirety of postpartum and
Right,
motherhood?
right.
And Vanina graciously shared her experiences of trauma and how that was affected, how her experience was affected as a result. And there are a number of ways that pregnancy or trying to get pregnant or postpartum can be traumatic for people or just present challenges. And today we're going to talk a little bit about one of the other challenges that could be really hard for a lot of women, and that would be pregnancy loss. And so I had an experience with that, and so that is going to be kind of the introduction to the topic today is my experience with that to relate to people out there, although my experience is not anybody else's experience. It's just helpful to kind of level with people and just be vulnerable. So last time I took on the role in terms of the episode of being more of the interviewer. And so this time we're going to reverse roles and Vanina is going to do that. So I will kind of hand over the mic to her and we'll just go from there.
So I know that you've already pre-recorded a little bit. I mean, actually, you have an episode, a full episode already on Life Psych about your experience with miscarriage, but can you give us a little recap about your experience and why you feel it to be so important, as all stories like these are very important for women in order for us to better understand what that grief and that loss does for us during a process like this in motherhood. And now that we're both expecting, right, also that intersection of having a miscarriage, and now we're both about to be mothers again and we're pregnant, and maybe if that brings anything up for you as well, and how does your body feel after an experience like that. So there's an array of topics that we could definitely touch on, but I definitely want our viewers and listeners check out her first episode on this where she really hones in on her experience because it's absolutely beautiful. But if you can just give us a quick little recap as well, that would be so great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the context is important. And also it'll be a little bit different because as you go through different stages of your perinatal journey, I'm now a mother of one, pregnant again. The way that the memory of something hits you is different throughout those stages.
Yes.
So when I originally recorded the podcast episodes about my miscarriage, it was a lot more close to the actual experience of loss. It's
And
now
sorry to
been
interrupt. That was your miscarriage, and then you had Leo.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so my first experience of being pregnant was the loss. And then I had my son Leo, and now I'm pregnant again. So three pregnancies in total, two healthy pregnancies so far. So yeah, and again, my story is not everybody's story, and I hope that anybody out there who's experiencing loss does experience what they want in terms of having healthy pregnancies or having healthy children. But for me, it didn't take me very long to get pregnant. So it was kind of, a lot of my friends had already and cousins had already had babies. I was focusing more on my career, but then my husband and I were ready to have a family, and so we started trying, and pretty quickly got pregnant, which I felt really excited about. Um, Not really having much context other than the clients that I saw. I did know that loss was really common. And through my clinical experiences had like at that point had some knowledge about it, and just in general from the education surrounding perinatal mental health, I definitely understood how common miscarriage is. And just for our viewers out there, it's so common. 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage, which I think is really important for women to know, that it is such a common experience. It doesn't mean anything's wrong with your body. It's just part of the natural way of things that sometimes happens. But so I knew that pregnancy loss was possible. And I knew a few people in my life had experienced loss before, but it wasn't like really part of my awareness that it was possible for me.
Right.
Right. So I was going into my first pregnancy really excited, naive about this, and at around like that 7-week mark, it was about to be Christmas. My husband and I decided we were going to tell our family. And we did, and it was really fun and really beautiful, but it was shadowed. Like there was a shadow of, like a foreshadow, I would say, during telling my family. I had started spotting a little. And so I like even paused with the idea of telling my family, because I was like, ooh, what does this mean? My providers at the time were like, just because you're spotting doesn't necessarily mean anything's wrong.
Yeah.
You don't want to cause alarm right away, because a
Right.
lot of times there's
I
nothing.
was spotting. I went to the hospital with my first pregnancy with Gennaro. I was bleeding a lot, and
A
that's like
lot
the
of people
first
do
time I
experience
miscarriage.
that.
And it was just like a delayed reaction of a period. My body was still trying to have a period months later, even though, and that happens too, right? And so there's so many things that happen that we're unaware of or that we're not educated in, and we try not to hold a space of fear, but we also don't want to be naive. So you're kind of stuck in this limbo of like, what does this mean?
Yeah. And it's so hard too in the beginning of pregnancy, especially your first pregnancy, not knowing what anything really feels like. Just going off of, well, what is this like? What is normal for pregnancy? And
Exactly.
if anybody listening has ever been pregnant, you know
Nothing's
that the
normal.
way
Every everything is normal. When you talk to your doctor, everything is normal. Nothing feels normal, but everything's fine. But then it's
yeah,
not fine. But then it's fine. It's very confusing.
it's confusing, especially for somebody. So me personally, I'm very in tune with my body. I'm very hypersensitive almost to the things going on in my body. So for my providers to continue to tell me that like everything you feel is normal, but then all these twinges not necessarily feel normal, you're like really trying to hold all that, and it's really hard at times. So I was trying to hold that, trying not to live in a space of fear, which is why I decided to continue with my plan to tell my family. And that night, I had probably been spotting for a few days, but it was getting a little bit more and more. Um, and the night after I had told my family, I went to sleep and had some really severe cramping, more than I had ever in that pregnancy at that point. So I knew at that point, like my body knew at that point, just whatever the type of cramping I had. I woke up the next day and I told my husband, I said, I think I need to go get an ultrasound. Like I think something's wrong. So we wound up, without going into too much detail, we wound up going to get an ultrasound. My provider at that time didn't have a spot for me that day, so I unfortunately had to go to like an ultrasound tech place, and they weren't able to tell me right on the spot if the baby was alive or not, which
Why
was
was that the case?
because they weren't my provider and they weren't the
So they make you
doctor.
wait?
I had to wait. So it was rushed. Like it said, on the script, like we need to know immediately. I could tell at the moment from the tech's face that, and I also like kind of knew what I was looking for. Not that I have that much medical background in that way, but you can see if there's a heartbeat or not. Like if you know what you're looking for, you can see. And I could tell that there wasn't. And I could tell on the tech's face that she was like, oh, this is not good. But we wound up going home and still holding out that little bit of hope that, I don't know how to read ultrasounds. Maybe I missed something.
Right. Maybe you're just anxious or looking too much into it. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. All of those thoughts. And so we get home and we eventually get the notification that we have like a result. And my husband was like, I'll go read it. And he went into the other room and he read it. And as soon as he came back into the other room, in my room, I could see his face. And that was probably one of the hardest moments we experienced as a couple ever. right, in our marriage, in our relationship, going from being so ecstatic to bringing a life together into this world, to expanding our love, to expanding our family, to that just in just a like the stop of one heartbeat just being taken away completely. That was really really hard. And you just are like, well, what do I do now? It's,
So
right, like,
that was my next question. So what did that process look like for you? I mean, we just told the family. You definitely didn't tell extended family. I mean, I didn't know that you had even ever experienced this until, I mean, over a year later. I mean, I was over your house visiting you. Leo was only a few months old, so this is quite a time later. And we were just taking a walk, and you casually just brought it up to me, like, "Oh, I miscarried," and I was just like, "Wait, what? When? When did this happen?" So, what was your approach personally like for you after it's the holidays? You told your family, and now you experience this grief and this loss with your partner.
yeah. So, well, there's the two parts of the process when you think about like the aftermath of a miscarriage. The whole part of like the medical process or the physical healing process, that is something that I go into more detail in other episodes. And so if anybody's interested in that more, like the scientific piece of it, or not even scientific, but just like the medical procedure of like what goes on, what your options are to allow your body to miscarry, and that I would
Sorry
say
to
is,
interrupt, but just so our viewers are aware, where could you find your other episodes? I know that you have it. Do you have the link on Reimagine Mind, which is your Instagram page, and also on Spotify, or how can
yes.
viewers find your episodes?
So on Spotify, that would be where like it's centrally all located. It's on a few other podcast hubs as well, like I think Amazon Music and iHeartRadio. But it's also on YouTube, so I have a YouTube channel, and you can find all of this on my website, reimaginedmind.com. Yes, so the physical process of miscarriage, I'll leave out of this conversation, but the emotional aftermath for me, well, I had my parents there, so I'm, very close with my parents, so they were there in the immediacy of finding out, which I'm very grateful for. Having them be like a kind of like a part of that immediate grief was helpful for me because I do lean on them for emotional support a lot. So that was helpful. So I think immediately finding out, I gave my husband and I some space where we just processed it very briefly together, and then my parents were there, and I had that conversation with them. You mentioned how you hadn't known that, for a while that I miscarried. So it's interesting that you bring that up because I hadn't told the extended family yet because I had just told a small group of people and then miscarried. So it was kind of like there was no time to really go out there and tell people. Like my cousins really hadn't known yet at that point. I have a lot of cousins.
Mhm.
So what I did do though was there was a few cousins that I had known had been pregnant, had had successful pregnancies already, that I've just been so close with my whole life. And so I immediately called a couple of them and basically told them I was pregnant and now I'm not, and this is what happened. For me, being able to verbally process is very important. That's how I process my emotions, is by talking it out a lot. That's how, for me, the feelings move through me easier when I'm able to process it out loud. So I called a couple of my cousins, and interestingly, one of them I had known had already miscarried in the past. So I knew that she had that experience. So that was something that I felt like I
That's
could
more
lean on.
comforting.
hmm
Yeah.
The thing that I found really interesting, though, was that two of my cousins I didn't know ever miscarried. And they had shared that with me when I called them and told them that this is what I was going through. And this was now years later from them miscarrying. And I was really surprised at that. And I think maybe I shouldn't have been surprised because in my clinical experience, I know a lot of women, they tell me as their therapist that they miscarried or they're having pregnancy loss experiences, but they don't really tell a lot of their close people.
So that goes into our topic of the silence, right? Why the silence when we experience a loss like this? And everybody experiences it differently, obviously, but it's a loss and it's tough. And maybe for some people it's not, right? Like I said, everyone experiences it differently. For some, I actually know a few people it's a shame, they feel shame, which I've worked with them through it of, don't hold shame in the sense of relief, right? So everyone experiences it differently, but why the silence of keeping it from people that could possibly help you or are your support system or are your closest friends and family members? Where do we think that that comes from?
Really good question. For me, it's a harder one to answer because I'm the opposite of that. I'm somebody who will reach out and tell people,
I am too.
yeah.
I am too.
But I do think you mentioned that the word shame. I think shame is a big part of it because what also comes with, and I could relate to this. Well, what also comes with pregnancy loss is these just like a lot of thoughts about, and probably more intrusive thinking. A lot of intrusive thinking about what's wrong with my body? Can I even get pregnant? I'm a woman. I'm of childbearing age. I'm expected to have children. I expect my body to be able to do this. Is there something genetically wrong? Like what is happening that is not allowed? Did I damage my body in some way that I don't know about? Have I did the because I experienced a lot of anxiety throughout my life. Did the anxiety I've experienced through my life like damage my ability to have children? And all of these thoughts, while saying them out loud, when you're in the like not a grief state of mind, they sound sometimes not reasonable, but in the moment it feels really reasonable.
Well, you're trying to make sense of everything. And you know that nothing's off the table when something like this happens because, like you said in the beginning, right? The thought of it happening to you wasn't even on the table. And so when something like this happens that we did not expect or see coming, like we know is so normal and so common. Like I said in our last episode, when the focus was a little more on me, of I'm a clinical psychologist, right? Like I worked with so many women in postpartum depression and anxiety, but I prepared myself and I felt like, I'm well versed in this. I have experience in this. I know how to help myself. I have the resources, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, right? And so I think that that kind of catches us off guard. Like we see other people experiencing this, our clients, we normalize it. We're there for them, but it's not that we think that we're special, which was a big topic we talked about in our previous episode as well. It just, I think that we're just hopeful. And it's definitely a humbling experience when we really, and I think that's what makes us so human too, when we're finally able to connect with other women in this way too, of it doesn't matter who you are, like life is life and these things happen and it's hard and we get by the best that we can, but it's helpful for us because again we're educated on it and we are very communicative in the way that we process our grief and our emotions, and we do lean on people for support. But I think that there is some shame that also comes with what's wrong with me. Did I do something right? I didn't even think that this could ever happen to me, and now we start backtracking and almost over calculating everything, like being very precise of, was it because I went out that one night? Was it because I wasn't getting enough sleep? Was it because I was working too much, right? Like, was it that fight that I had with my husband where I was really overwhelmed and angry and all those little things?
And they are, like I said earlier, like intrusive thinking because our brain is meant to be there to help us make sense of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so, as you said, we're just trying to make sense of a very confusing and difficult experience. I think a part of it is shame, but I do think part of it also, the not sharing, is in general that as a society we're pretty grief averse. Like we don't really we
Yes.
don't really like to lean into the uncomfortable. We don't want to make other people uncomfortable with our story. We don't want to feel the feelings that come up for us when we share difficult stories about our life. And in that, it really stifles our ability to process through it with other people because we are, in my belief, we're all very connected on so many different levels. So utilizing each other as a way to move through difficult experiences is very natural for me. And I think when other people finally do that, it's very healing for them. But that hurdle for a lot
It's
of
a big
people,
hurdle because, like you
yeah,
said, as a society, I mean, look at us now. where we are, we're so progressive, but we were never meant to mother alone. Women used to have families in villages and in communities where everybody helped everyone. Even we're talking about 30 years ago. I'm not talking about 100 years ago where everyone would just share their breast to feed the other person's baby if they were lacking milk. Like, I'm not talking that far back, even though that's a beautiful thing. Like, I'm talking back even when I was raised. Like, my grandma used to take me for a week. My aunts and uncles with my cousins used to take me for a couple days. Like, everyone was so hands-on. And I feel like there was even a study done recently that cousins aren't even that close anymore. Like, they're not considered immediate family, first cousins.
Yeah,
And for
which
me
is
growing
weird.
up, it was, right? And so I feel like as time passes, we become more isolated in our own homes, in motherhood, in our marriages, where it doesn't feel that safe or that normal, quote unquote, to share the hard parts. It's like, no, you keep that within yourself, you process it within your relationship, and then you keep it moving.
Yeah, but it's strange though because like you said, our society is so progressive in a lot of ways. Um, but there is this sense of while we're connected more than we ever have been in terms of technology, we're very disconnected from that just human nature piece, right? That ability to that universality. Like we all experience grief in so many different ways in life. We all experience a loss. And I think you kind of put it well that we kind of retreat back and become more isolated. And then I think we lose sight of how common all of these experiences are. And it becomes more fear based to share because fear of what people are going to think and fear of what it's going to bring up for me if I say it out
Right,
loud.
right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so we talked about the silence, the immediate grief. What about the worry that goes on? So this was prior to you having Leo now, right? Which was your second pregnancy and your firstborn son. What did that look like for you now, experiencing your second pregnancy? It wasn't, how much time had passed? Wasn't that much time, I don't think.
It was about 3 months.
Okay.
So
So,
I allowed my body time to heal. For me, a big part of the healing process was being really more positive in a state of mind where not overly positive. I allowed myself the grief. I allowed myself the sadness because I think that's really important. But really focusing on the this is normal. This happens for a lot of people. It doesn't mean something's wrong with my body. Don't jump to the catastrophic fears when you have no reason to believe that they're true. So I really tried to sit within that, which allowed me to say, okay, as soon as my body feels physically ready, I'm emotionally ready to get pregnant again. So I leaned into my faith. I, believed that whatever happened for a reason that maybe I won't know in this life, but it happened for a reason. And maybe it was to help me be able to connect with some of my clients or have even deeper empathy than I would be able to without having had that experience. You never know. You could make meaning out of a lot of things.
yeah.
But for me, that was helpful. It's helpful to make meaning. It's helpful to lean into faith, and then in so doing, I was just like, all right, let's get back to it. Let's get back to trying. And we did, and pretty quickly we're able to get pregnant again. And yeah, it's a different thing to be pregnant without having a loss in your history versus being pregnant with a loss in your history. Uh, and
And you can speak on both sides now, right?
yes,
Because you have Leo, so I'm sure this pregnancy now looks different for you. And all pregnancies, I can speak for myself at least, all three of my pregnancies so far have looked insanely different,
drastically different. Drastically,
drastically different.
yeah.
So, what does it look like for you losing a pregnancy, having a healthy pregnancy, and now going into technically your third pregnancy? You have not a negative experience, not, but a grief filled experience to an extent into the experience that you wanted. And now, what does this one look like for you? What does that process look like?
Yeah, I really thought that having had a really healthy pregnancy with Leo, um, while there were challenges in terms of the symptoms I experienced with that pregnancy, it was a healthy pregnancy. And I really thought that having had that experience, that this pregnancy I would feel less anxious. Um, but I didn't. I was very anxious in my third pregnancy. I'm now in my second trimester. And with that comes, for me, came a more peaceful feeling because you start to have more symptoms, not the uncomfortable symptoms, right? I had the uncomfortable symptoms in the first trimester, which in a really weird way is comforting. If you're nauseous all the time, if you're nauseous all the time, if you're having cramps that aren't too severe, but they're there, you're like, oh, something's happening in my body.
If you
So
feel like you barely have the will to live, you're doing great in your pregnancy. It's normal.
pregnancy is good. It's viable. um, so yeah, so it's a weird thing because you don't want to feel like death, but you're also like happy that you know that something's happening in your body. But after the after the first trimester, going into your second, you do start to have other changes, whether they're changes in your physical appearance. Like I get a little bit more like puffy in my face during pregnancy, and I know
Yeah.
that now.
Same. Yep.
You start to like pop a little bit sooner in your second
Mhm.
pregnancy or subsequent pregnancies, and so you start to get these like actual pregnancy symptoms that you visually can see, and so it becomes really reassuring. You could start feeling flutters in your belly, and so those reassuring pieces also being after like the 12-week mark, because 12 weeks, 13 weeks, that first trimester is touch and go. You don't know. That's when so many things are just forming, and that's when, if something's not right in the genes, that's usually when it's going to show up and something is going to happen, whether it's a miscarriage, whether it's a test coming back to show you that there's something, not correct, not fully healthy. You're going to find out most of the time in the earlier stage. That's not to say that people don't have experiences of loss very late in pregnancy. That definitely happens, and that's tragic and it's terrible. But for my experience, just speaking from my point of view, having the stats being on my side after the 12-week mark really gave me a feeling of ease.
Relief.
So that early though stage of pregnancy was very hard in this pregnancy, and I didn't expect that. I expected to feel more confident in it, given that I had a healthy pregnancy and I have a healthy baby, thank God. I was and it's weird because then I felt really disappointed in myself at times. Like, I should be able to get through this without feeling anxious. I've been here before. Like, I know the tools, and as a therapist, how often do you have to tell yourself,
I
like,
feel like that's all we keep circling back to is a lot of our own shame as professionals. It's like, I should know better. And my motto has always been, when you know better, you do better. But it's constantly humbling. And I have to tell myself, like, you're human like everybody else. You're not God and you're not special. Like, just because you know things and you've practiced them and you help others doesn't mean it's going to be any different for you. Like, you're going to go through this as well. And I think that that's something so important to keep in mind for the both of us during this journey and going into our third pregnancies is expect the unexpected, number one.
yes.
That's my new motto, is just expect the unexpected and, you know, try to give yourself a bit more grace, even if it's looking a little more mentally and psychologically and physically more difficult for you than your previous healthy pregnancy. I was even asking you the other day, I'm like, is it normal for us to have these kind of cramps? Like, I thought our insides were, I guess,
Stretched already.
stretched already. I'm like, why does this feel harder? And so every pregnancy is just so different from the one previous. And it kind of messes with your head a bit. It really does, because you feel like you're a veteran. You feel like I've already been through this, right? And then again, expect the unexpected. It's a whole new level of hard, and you're just like, great.
I couldn't agree more. There's a lot of things that you don't expect when it comes to pregnancy. And part of that, though, going back, if I'm circling back, trying to make it full circle to what we were talking about, part of that is because we don't talk enough about all of the things that we experience as women during pregnancy and postpartum. If we spoke about it more often and we're more open about it with each other, it would be a lot less surprising that my second pregnancy, third pregnancy, that cramps were really present. Because when I asked my provider about it, my midwife said that it's common to have more pain in your second, third pregnancies than it is in your first one. Something I had no idea about. But had I, had that experience been taught to me by my friends, family, other people, I would have expected it. It would have been something that I wasn't surprised at.
Well, here's the thing, like something that I'm personally not struggling with, but that I see and kind of gets in my head a bit because then I think I'm not fully enjoying motherhood is I'm very raw and transparent. Almost like I come off, I think, as a glass half empty when it comes to motherhood and my viewpoints because I'm always talking about the so called negatives for me. Like I'm always talking about in detail how hard, how emotional, just how much I miss certain things or my needs not being met or. And then I see all of my friends and family, and all they do is post about how much they love motherhood. And that's not to say that I don't. It's just I have this desire to really be transparent about the difficult and the ugly truth about the beautiful parts of life, such as motherhood, for the simple fact that I wish people, women, my mother, my aunts, my cousins would have told me these things, would have shared with me these things so that I didn't feel so alone, so that when I experienced them, it didn't feel so scary and I didn't feel so shameful and think to myself, well, what's wrong with me? Because again, we are very isolated, even though we're so connected and there's so many pages that we can follow. And there are people like me that are very transparent about things. They're strangers. And it's a big difference when you're hearing it from your mother, when you're hearing it from your aunts and your cousins and your close friends and your neighbors, right? But I think people are afraid a little bit to talk about the difficulties that go with it because we're afraid that we're going to be judged or we're going to be perceived as we don't love motherhood. But there is that duality. Like we're allowed to have that duality of fear, of missing our previous life, of missing what our marriage looked like, of mourning, right? Like another level of grief. And that doesn't mean we don't absolutely love our life now and our children and the beauty that our body creates. It's just you can feel both.
I talk a lot about that with my clients, and I use it a lot in my own life. The concept of being able to hold opposites at the same time. It's not an easy thing to do, but it is easier once you practice it. And I think when people could get more comfortable with the idea that you can be both grieving in a moment and also find joy in moments at the same time, uh, that's a powerful ability to have. We Before starting recording this episode, we were talking about the ability for women who experience loss in pregnancy to feel joy for family members or friends who are having healthy pregnancies.
Right.
Um, in my experience personally, I had a lot of people around me having pregnancies and babies. Like it was just like the baby boom in the family, which is a beautiful thing. And amidst all this baby booming, I had just lost a pregnancy. And for me, I try to be somebody who looks towards the positive, looks towards the joy. But you're also experiencing a serious, sad loss at the time. For me, it was during Christmas time. So on one hand, it's like the best time of year in my eyes, right? I very much enjoy the holidays. And on the other hand, I just experienced probably one of the hardest losses I ever experienced in life. So how do you do both? Do I just go to Christmas time like a grieving person and not enjoy any of it, or am I able to have that be a part of my reality while also experiencing some joy from what was coming out in front of me, which was Christmas and all of the traditions that I enjoy? And I think that's one example, but for a lot of women out there, it's really hard for them, and understandably so. It's really hard for them to be going through fertility issues, going through IVF, all of these. I mean, I have a number of clients who have gone through rounds and rounds of different fertility treatments while their friends are, having baby showers and dressing their babies up in costumes and
I,
all of
I
those.
personally went through this when I was pregnant. Certain people in my circle were having difficulties at the time, and it felt like I had to kind of minimize my happiness so that I wouldn't affect them. And I'm sure vice versa, like they felt like they couldn't celebrate what I was going through, even though they loved me so much because they were struggling. Yeah. What would your recommendation be for women that are going through this loss in a grieving state and have close friends and family around them celebrating life, celebrating pregnancy? What's your recommendation for them on either how to feel themselves or how to process these emotions and also how to feel comfortable, I guess, being open about, like, I want to celebrate you and I will, but I would love that maybe you checked in on me as well because I'm having a hard time too, and allowing for that duality to exist within intimate relationships of women so that we can support each other through these phases.
It's a great question. And I think a really important one because it allows the space for women to be more supportive of each other. But it comes with communication. And it comes with, I think, leaning into the really uncomfortable parts of life for us. So, my recommendation when I'm working with people, if I were giving it to myself, the recommendation if I were talking to a family member would be first and foremost to find the space for yourself, whatever that looks like, whether it's with family, whether it's with your church, whether it's with therapy. Find the space and give yourself the space to do that grieving. So that would be first and foremost, right? Because,
Agreed.
right,
Naturally just grieve. Feel what you need to feel.
yeah, because it's valid and it's hard and it's sad and you need the space to do it. We talk about in therapy, and you probably have heard this saying before, you have to feel it to heal it. If you're
Yes.
not allowing it through your body, it's going to get stuck in your body. And
Well,
that's,
I always say if you resist, it will persist.
yes,
Like you
I
just
use
have
that too.
to.
It's so true. So the more you resist it, the more it's going to be present in a damaging way, to your body and your mind. So I'd say that would be first and foremost. Allow yourself the space to feel it, so that you can start the process of healing it. And then I would probably go towards that concept that I just mentioned of being able to hold opposites. You talk about duality. If you have a baby shower coming up and you have recently experienced a loss, or you're going through IVF or any sort of fertility challenges, sometimes you need to give yourself the space to not go to those things,
And that's
and
okay.
that's okay.
But I
Um,
think the follow up would be reaching out to that person that you're close to and explaining it to them and saying, I am celebrating you. I am happy for you. I do love you. And I'm so happy that you get to go through this, but I'm not in a point in time in my life where I feel safe going to something like that. And I would like to celebrate you in a different way when I feel better prepared.
that's exactly it. But it comes with communication, and it comes with being able to be really vulnerable with the closest people in your life, and knowing that, like, trusting, having faith in those friendships, having faith in
Mhm.
those relationships, that
Yeah.
person on the other end is not going to be mad at you for that. That they'll appreciate that you were open with them. And they'll receive it in a way that you meant it, which is genuine, which is, I'm going through this grieving process right now, and while I'm so happy for you because I am happy for you, I'm really sad for me. And right now that space is taking up a little bit more space in my that energy is taking up a little bit more space in my life right now. Um, but I would hope, and I encourage everybody to hopefully get to that place with whatever type of healing journey they go on, where they could hold opposites and they could withstand and tolerate a little bit of that discomfort, while also bringing in and absorbing some of the joy that's also there for their family members and friends. And it's not an easy thing to do, but I think it's an important thing to do because that is going to happen throughout our life in so many areas.
Mhm.
We're going to have a loss of somebody we love, but at the same time there's going to be a birth of a child, or we're going to lose a job but our best friend is going to get a promotion.
Right.
Right, like there's so many ways that this shows up for us. And while it's important to take time to retreat and just go through whatever grieving process you need to go through, it's also important to get back out there, be honest with the people that you love, and allow yourself to just go through this thing that we call life, which is really hard and really beautiful, but all at the same time. Right? It's
Right.
up and down all at once, and sometimes that's disorienting. So go get your bearings, find a place to ground yourself, but then come back out and, take a deep breath again.
So I know that we talked about off camera that, you know, the loss for you and your husband, you guys were able to navigate that quite well in a very connected, safe way with each other. But I do know people, and I've had clients as well, where that is not the case, unfortunately. Do you have any recommendations for maybe mothers or women that have experienced loss and they're maybe they're moving on quicker, and they're ready to start and the husband is not, or vice versa, maybe the husband is, or the partner is, like dismissing it and just saying like, let's just try again, like you weren't even that early, like those comments that are made of that are very hindering, to the grief, and dismissive of, well, you weren't even that far along, right? Because I know that that happens, that's unfortunately very common. What would you recommend for someone going through something like that?
Yeah, that definitely is true. I mean, I feel really blessed and grateful that my husband and I were able to work through it in a connected way, as you described. But that's not always the case for people, and especially after multiple losses, right? It's,
You start to get a little numb.
you do.
Maybe one of the partners, or not even numb, maybe you start to get disheartened of like, let's just be happy, just us. And we see that a lot as well of, there's always one person that maybe wants to just keep trying and is hopeful, and the other one's like, why can't it just be us? Like, I surrender. Maybe this isn't meant for us. And that also brings friction into a relationship.
Yeah, there's that expectation gap between not only yourself, right? As a woman, and also the man, you have this expectation originally that things are going to go well with pregnancy and you're going to have a child. And then the reality, that's what I mean by the gap, that expectation versus reality may not be that. And then that's happening within yourself. And now you have to also experience and navigate that expectation gap between what your expectations are and what your partner's expectations are. So it's a lot of dynamic to work through. The reason that's a hard question to answer is because it really depends on your partner's personality. Are they open to maybe coming into wherever you find healing? So, for example, what I find with some of my clients is that they have a hard time explaining the mental health struggles that come with fertility challenges, or even just mental health struggles in general, right? Like, I've had clients with just very severe OCD that they don't know how to explain it clinically well to their partner. So sometimes we invite the partner into a session and I help facilitate that understanding. So if you feel like you have that person, whether it's a therapist or a coach or whomever in your life that has the words that you feel like you don't have, invite your partner into that space to share that with them. I have found a lot of success with that. But why I say it's complicated is because not every partner is open to being part of that space. That is a harder and more deep question to answer. What do you do when you have a partner who is shutting down, not willing to have the conversations, not open to understanding your point of view? That's a relationship conversation, and that's, I think, maybe for another episode. But just to, I guess, put it out there that's validate how challenging that could be for people.
Because it's very common, right?
Yeah.
And again, I don't think it's an answer that's a fits all, right? It's not like a one size fits all for that kind of question. But I think it's just important to understand that that is very common as well. So for anyone going out there that's experienced pregnancy loss and maybe you're more ready to move on, or you're still in your grieving process and your partner is on the opposite end of wherever you are, it's important to understand that, it's common, it's normal, it's difficult, but if you both are or try to be communicative and receptive to maybe what the other is going through, there is hope. And hopefully, you guys can come together through an experience like this that's so difficult and hurtful, and come out with a better understanding of who you are as individuals, as possible future parents, and as partners.
Yeah, really well said. When I do work with couples, I think being able to get them on the same page for one goal is always a good starting point. So if you're not in therapy with your partner, that's okay. But if you're having struggles communicating and you're going through something challenging like loss, maybe finding that one common point, that one commonality where you do have this common goal. Oh, we do both have the goal. We do both value being parents. So, what might that look like if we can't achieve it naturally? So, we both are headed in the same direction. We just need to find out how we both feel about walking, which path we're going to walk. But that does take communication, that does take openness. And
I think it takes validation as well. And I think my personal advice would be for anyone going through something like this, it's first validating yourself and that it's okay to feel however you're feeling. Like, hold space for whatever part of you is ready to move on or is not and is still grieving and needs time, and your body needs time, and your hormones and your mind needs time. And then make sure you're validating that. Again, if you're not in therapy or you don't have a coach, that's okay, but make sure that you're holding a space where you feel safe within yourself. And then when presenting it to your partner, whichever side they're on, validating their side as well, so that it doesn't feel like when you're communicating, like you're battling against each other. And you do see their perspective and you do see their desires, and it's easier to come to a common goal that way when we kind of validate the other person as well. But we can't do that if we haven't validated ourselves first, because then what comes up is we are in dire need to be heard by the person, and we get into defense mode and we lose sight of the common goal and the love in the relationship. So first, take care of you, make sure that your needs are met, make sure that you understand your needs, right? Like sometimes we don't even know what we need. So take that time to understand what you just went through, what it looks like for you, and then validate it. Hold a space for it, and then validate your partner's perspective as well, and try to come to a common ground.
I think that's a good like catch-all way to move through things with your partner. And then those nuanced experiences we could potentially have more conversation about what that looks like in more nuanced types of relationships. But I think in general that's really great advice. Okay. So I think with that being said, we covered a lot today. Each of the things that we spoke about could be elaborated on, and I'm sure you and I will get on another episode in the near future to talk more deeply about any one of these topics, because I think they're really important to women. A big part of my goal is being a piece of women's villages, because I think you mentioned the village earlier and how it's kind of dissipated over the course of history, and I think if we can bring that back for women, not only would it be so helpful during pregnancy and postpartum, but just motherhood in general. If we could connect with each other, and we do have the wonderful platforms to connect with. So if there's anybody out there who's looking for support in that way, when it comes to wellness, when it comes to mental health, you can reach me through my website. If you go to my website, reimaginemind.com, I'm the first person that you would be in contact with. If you reach out through the website or you reach out by phone, I'll be your first point of contact and help you get in touch with whoever is best for you, whether it's through my practice or whether it's somewhere else that would be better suited for your needs. So we're here to help, and Vanina also has a lot of great resources too.
Yes, so if anyone is ever looking for a life or trauma-informed coach, I also do couples counseling as well. You can reach me on my Instagram. It has the link, Penetrate Through Shame. It has a link to my website. My website is penetratethroughshame.com. And my podcast is PTSV on Spotify, Apple Music, and I also have a YouTube channel that I just opened as well with all of our episodes that are on it, and our newest episode that is coming out this Friday. What's today? Tuesday, April 22nd, so it's coming out on the 25th. So I'm super excited for our first episode together, where we are co-hosting and touching base a little bit about what I went through during my postpartum journey, and now this second part series I'm super excited about, so you will be able to find it on there as well. And any future work that we do. So thank you so much, Maria, for sharing your story, your perspective, your knowledge, your resources. It's a massive help. I mean, you are so experienced when it comes to this world, not just as a mother like me, but more so on the clinical end of it. I have my experience as well, but I feel like you are very saturated in this world of the perinatal world, and it's a wonderful thing because you are creating a huge village full of resources and guidance and support for women, and I know that it's so needed. And also for any viewers and listeners, I think it would be really awesome if moving forward, for anyone that's listened this far along, thank you so much. If you have any suggestions on episodes that you want to hear, or topics that you want to hear, please either slide in her DMs or definitely slide in mine. I can create a poll and you guys can just let us know topics that you want to specifically have knowledge and resources on, and we can talk about them.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I love that idea. And thank you, Vanina, for holding the space, being a part of my village. I appreciate you. This is really wonderful, and I look forward to the next time we get on and do this together.
Thank you so much, Maria. I appreciate you. And yeah, we will talk soon.